Hi everyone, welcome back. Today I'm playing with wood blocks because I gotta get this thing on the ground to start fabricating the back. If you're new to the channel or a returning viewer or subscriber, thank you so much for watching and sticking in there with me on this journey. I greatly appreciate it. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. It helps me out a whole lot. You have no idea how much it actually helps without costing you a dime. Maybe someday we'll get a little bit of pocket change from Google, who's a multi-billion-dollar company, from ad revenue, but that's a long way off from now. So for now, just enjoy watching me be terrible at things, I guess. I don't know what the hell to say. So anyway, we're working on getting this thing on the ground. And I've been searching my garage because I've been trying to find ride height blocks. I think the minimum ride height in this car is 6 inches when I go to Stafford. And that's the basic gist of it. So what I wanted to do was put the car down, like the main frame rails of the chassis down on the ground, to try to get 6 inches up, probably all the way around, honestly, because that's at least the minimum height that everything would actually be. Now, obviously, with the setup of the car and the ride height minimum being 6 inches, there's going to be spots in the car that are over 6 inches or even well over 6 inches. So for me to, I don't know what exactly they're going to be, what those ride heights are exactly. I have a good idea, but I don't want to push the limits too much. You know, I don't want to have a good run, be happy and celebrating, and then we go to tech, they measure a crankshaft height or a fuel cell height or something really dumb that I should have taken care of in the garage, and it's like just a hair under because a frame height was a little bit too low. No, we don't want to do that. I want it to be something that I never have to think about, but also won't hurt the performance of the car because it's up too high or whatever the case may be. So if I set the car on frame height blocks, and I put the fuel cell in the car and I check the crank height of the motor, because I'm gonna need to do that. I'm gonna need to figure out where the engine places, because actually, why don't I show you? That's another thing that we need to tackle probably in this episode, since the welder's out and I fixed the wheel on it. The engine needs to go in. We need to figure out the minimum crankshaft height so that when we're in tech, like I said, we don't have an issue. So if we need to put spacers under the engine mounts, whatever. But we also need to do this. We also need to figure out, because there's a rule, how far back or forward your engine can be. So we need to figure out, which engine mounts to use for tolerance. I'll figure that out at some point. And then we also need to build rear mounts for the engine. My previous car had a traditional style transmission crossmember mount that was just a bolt-in piece. We're not using that. What we're gonna do instead is a bell housing mount where you have the forward motor mounts under the middle of the engine, and then off the back where the bell housing bolts to the back of the engine, there's these shoes that are like a C shape with a foot on it. Matter of fact, I have some over here. I'll show you if you're not familiar with what they are. Kind of like this. The dowel for the alignment on the bell housing goes here. You've got the bell housing bolts, they bolt in to this thing. And then you'd have like somewhere to put it, like a standoff on the side behind the engine. So we got to figure out where that is, likely with a floor jack and a piece of wood under the oil pan so that I can get the angle right. We'll likely put a transmission and at least some kind of a rear end in it just to make sure, but alignment should be fine. I'll just run it, either that or I'll run a string down the car and make sure that the tail shaft is, we'll figure that out later. But for now, those are the two tasks that we really kind of have to do. We got to get the car on the ground. We got to get the rear part where the fuel cell is going to go in set to height, and we got to get the front with the crankshaft set to height as well. It's really easy to get distracted and think, oh, well, you got to put the electrical system in, and you got to put switches in, you got to put gauges in, you got to paint it. Well, it's like, pump the brakes. You can't paint it until all the fabrication's done. And you can't wire it until there's something in there to wire it to. I have a battery box to put in. You probably see that up on the shelf here. But we got to put that in as well. But like I said, it's kind of hard to wire something if there's nothing there to wire it to. And it's really hard for me to put plumbing in, like fuel lines and fuel filters and stuff, if there's nothing there to put it to. So if we put the drive line in, make sure all the heights are in, get the fuel cell in, and all the fabrication is essentially done except for putting the body on it, then we can paint it and not have to worry about it. Obviously, I'll probably paint it and we can just drill some holes when we're doing electricals, and that's not going to be a big deal. But like I said, there's so much to do. It's very easy to get distracted, very easy to get confused. But rule number one is don't paint what you got to fabricate. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Now, to put this car on the ground, I've really been digging through my stash of wood, and I thought I had to cut some, but apparently I had enough just random scraps hanging around that I could put together 4 6-inch blocks. Apparently, when I put the rear clip on my last car, I cut 2 6s, a 7, and a 5 to kind of simulate something relatively close to what the frame heights were like at the time. Obviously, it wasn't completely perfect, but it was very close. And then eventually I had to square it all off completely to get the wheelbase checked, because with a 4-link, you can change your wheelbase by how the car sits. So I got 2 6s here. That was from that previous attempt. I got a 5, but I've also got a 1-inch block from the bottom of a mailbox mount. That's exactly 1 inch, so that's 6. And then I found these 2x6s and I measured it from top to bottom, and it's literally exactly 6 inches. So I'm gonna lower it down. Well, I'll probably sweep it out first, then lower it down on these 4 blocks. It's gonna be super low to the ground, but that's fine. At least I can reach things. So we went through the process. We cleaned up a little bit underneath it and, put the right blocks under it. So I thought. So we got 6-inch blocks under it. Then I read the rules. While they might have a 6-inch ride height rule, apparently for the fuel cell, you have to have it on 5-inch blocks, and the minimum height of the fuel cell has to be 10 inches. So now I have to go back and swap every single one of the blocks back out to be 5-inch blocks instead of 6. So did not expect that one, but whatever, we'll get her fixed. Given the nature of the floor in this garage, considering it kind of slopes away to the left front corner, it's not exactly flat. It's kind of flattish here, but then it kind of dips away. You have to put some kind of spacing on the left front. So we're gonna work one side at a time, because now the left front is about 6 inches off the ground, but everything else is 5. That's at least got the back even at 5 inches. And now I can move to this and get the fuel cell cage, which is right here. I'm gonna have to cut some of this old bar material off. I might put the actual cell in this cage. I'm not too sure yet. I do have to clean some of it up first. Then I might stick the fuel cell in the cage, put the top on it, bolt it down, and then after doing that, I might go and cut this old stuff off, because it is, at this point, the only thing holding these in from falling apart, basically. I did it to the rules. This is how they said to build your cage for your fuel cell. That's how I did it, That's why I did it. So anyway, we're going to have to clean that up first. But when we put this thing in, I got to come up with something to measure 10 inches up. And I think it's not the cage itself. I think it's the actual fuel cell that has to be 10 inches from the ground. Now, I hate that, but unfortunately, that's the rules. On 5-inch blocks, 10 inches from the ground. So I'll find something that I can space it up with. I might just take and put a big flat plate of, I think I got a piece of wood that's like a rectangle over there. It's not just a rectangle, it's a big wide piece that will actually bridge all the gaps. Then put it on a floor jack and just kind of jack it up in some semblance of order here and measure it. And then we're going to have to center it to where it needs to be located. I've done this plenty of times. I've done it at least 5 or 6 times to cars through different rear clips or different cars, whatever the case is. I've done this a handful of times. So that's our procedure at this moment. We'll figure out exactly how to get this accomplished. Like I said, I'd love to clean these ends off because I got a lot of 1-inch tubing sitting up here that I could just easily front and back the gap, weld it up. Am I the best welder in the world? No. Am I a decent welder? Yes. Because I can trust my welds with my life, which is exactly what I've done my entire career. If you can't trust your life to what you weld, don't do it. Personally, I feel okay with it. Your results may vary. There she is. Fuel cell container to the rules is now in. I still have to weld all the stuff on the bottom side, but I do have to get under the car and tie in a couple little loose ends. Not a big deal. Cell is in. By the way, if you were wondering, no, there is nothing in that cell. I drained it out completely, and if I'm going to weld anytime, it's not going to be in the car because I don't want it getting hot. I probably have to replace the bladder in it anyway because the date's coming up. I think next year. Don't worry about it. I got it covered. So, now that that's in, I'm getting out of here. As you can tell by the state of not only me, but the world around me, it's not a great place to be. And also, I've showed you this before, but I'm going to show it to you again. I wish my thing would work, but I think it overheated. Yeah, my temperature gun overheated. Or the batteries died. Whatever the case is, but the last time I checked the roof, it's at 121 degrees. I need to do something about that. Pete gave me some insulation, but it's definitely not enough, so I think I might just buy a crate of spray foam and just real quick, because I can feel it. It's just beating down on me. I gotta get out of here because I'm gonna die of heat stroke. So I'm gonna go take a very ice cold shower and I will see you tomorrow. It's the next day and well, you know me. I was reading the rules and you know how we were putting the rear fuel cell cage in. By the way, I've already given up on air conditioning because it's far too hot out. So I got my fan cart blowing. I got that fan blowing, just basically a fart in the breeze because it's not doing anything. But when we had to do the fuel cell, this car had to be on 5-inch blocks, and the cell had to be 10 inches from the ground. I just read the rules for crank height, and they said on 6-inch blocks, 13 whatever it is from the ground. So now I've got to figure out how to get not only the engine out, but to get it over here and get the engine hoist underneath it. I might have to jack the car back up and put it back on jack stands. Basically hang the engine in somehow. I might need a tie strap across the X member to hold the transmission in place, but then drop it back down on ride height blocks with an engine attached. So I don't know. This is going to be a real convoluted mess. I mean, do I use that motor sitting there, which is the built motor, or do I use the crate motor, which is going to be in the car? I don't think the crank height is any different because they're both Chevy 350s. I wanted to use the built motor because it's already got the lift plate on it, and it has a transmission in it, so, and a bell housing and all that stuff. Yeah, it's a little heavier, but I can align everything in there. It's already hooked up. I'll give it a shot. You know, if it's not high enough when I put the crate back in, we'll have to check it with the crate. If it's not high enough, we'll throw some washers under the motor mounts. I don't know. So we got to get it working though. Starting to have second thoughts about using this engine to mock up because I'm looking at the difference in oil pans. This is kind of a stock style, and you need a lot of spacer to bring that thing up. But I look at the crate one, and it looks a little bit more flat over on, well, you can't really see it from here, but it's got, you know, a stock crate kick-out pan where you've got the pan, but then the front edge of the pan after the kick out here is kind of flatter towards the front. It is deep, but it is flatter. So I'm considering maybe taking this back out, putting the crate and hooking that up to the bell housing and transmission assembly, just at least for mock-up. And then once I do that, then I can get at least a good idea, because the crate motor is what we're going to be running at Stafford. I'd like, in a perfect world, I'd sell this motor to whoever and buy a backup crate motor, but it ain't worth that much. I'm just looking for some kind of money off. We'll work on that some other time, but I'm just trying to get an idea of how this thing fits. Like I said, kind of considering putting the crate in because it's a little flatter on the front. So I think that's probably going to happen. That is if I don't die of heat stroke first, because it's hot. I think I'm going to have to call it, because nothing's more important than your own health. And the second I kind of cut that video, I started trying to cool myself off in front of the fan and started feeling lightheaded, and I said, nope. I've been working outdoors in the heat. Been high 80s, low 90s for a couple weeks. I work outside, and then I come back home and I work in at least a 98 degree shop, 12 to 16 hour days. I think I'm done here. I think I'm going to call it for the day before I pass out. So, somebody who's not passing out. Yeah, look at him not sweating to death, not whatever. Anyway, what's up?
I just wanted to come here and say hi.
Oh, are you enjoying the heat?
No.
You want to see how hot it is in the roof? Let me see. If I hold this gun out this way, it says 97 degrees, right? If I hold it straight out at the edge of the shop, that's not at the roof. That says, okay, I lied. It was 94 and a half degrees. I pointed at the roof. Let's see. Where am I standing right now? Oh, that's a good one. 120 degrees.
Oh.
I think I'm gonna go inside before I pass out.
Before we go.
Stop taking my thunder, boy. You haven't worked on the race car. Go check him out. The Random Kid 630. Hey, it's Roger on. What is it? Shorts? Shorts. Yeah, that's right. That thing. I'm delirious from the heat, so I'm shutting down.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Next day. Unfortunately, like I said, this has to come back out so that we can get the spacing correct on the engine that we're going to use. That's not to say that I won't have a use for this engine anymore, especially if I decide at any point in the future to go back to Thompson, if hopefully the people leasing the place keep doing it and actually start getting cars again. That would be amazing. But if we're gonna do this to the track we have to go to, I think that, you know, with the oil pan difference, we're gonna have to do it. I'm gonna have to search the garage to find some kind of a spacer material so that I can space the engine up off the mounts the proper amount so that it won't hit the cross member. And that's it. So let's do it. Trying to come up with a way to keep the back end up without using the jack, because this thing has to kind of go on 6-inch ride height blocks to figure out where the crank height's gonna be. And when that happens, then I can put the rear mounts on. I'm gonna have to cut this old Z-bar mount off of this old ass SFI bell housing, but that's fine. We'll have to do that anyway. I spilled pretty much every ounce of gear oil out of that transmission, so hopefully that actually sops up in the whatever. But here's my genius or stupidity. I hooked a big trucker chain underneath where the transmission is to try to hold the back end of the engine up using these old, well, lead brackets. Clamp them to the roll bar, put a bolt in it, sink the bolt down, sink everything down, wrap the chain around it, and we'll see what happens. I'm doing this so that you don't have to. I apologize for the wind noise, but I need air. Here we go. Everybody duck. Nice and slow. Is it doing anything? Oh, God. Oh. I don't like standing in the way of that. I'm very perplexed. Oh yeah, because I didn't let the engine noise down. Let's do that. Okay. All right. Okay, now we're tight. It's not so bad though. It's actually not as bad as I thought. We're off here. I got the engine as close to centered as I can. Like I said, we have to figure out what the crank height's gonna be so that we can figure out the spacer, and then we can put in the rear mounts. If I just put a rear tranny mount in, I know, but I don't really feel like doing that this time. Although, you know what's funny is I kind of guarantee that I'll probably be putting one in anyway, even though that's really not the way we do things anymore. Because it'll probably be just 10 times easier than me trying to fit things past it. Because I remember trying to put headers in. I don't even think the headers will fit past those things. So I'm going to have to do a lot of research to get this thing figured out completely. It's part of the process. This is how you do things. You got to figure out what fits, what doesn't, what to do, and what not to do. This might be a what not to do, but we're going to figure it out, aren't we? Again, apologies for the noise. I got her on 6-inch blocks. That's a 5-inch block with a 1-inch spacer. She's sitting in the car on the little level because you can see it's tight, real tight to the cross member. I looked at the rules, and from 6-inch blocks, the center of the crank has to be 13 1/4 inches. No, 13 3/4 inches. Hang on. I had to get out of the wind. Yes, 13 3/4 while on 6-inch blocks on all 4 corners. You see 6 over there, 6 over there. Obviously, if there's 6 on 3 corners, it's going to be 6 on all 4. So there's 1, 2. From the center right now, it is give or take 14 inches. I grabbed my frame height measuring tape. The body on this is exactly 2 inches. So I use it for like frame heights because math is really easy with this thing. So I set it to about, let's see, that says 11 3/4, so that means 13 3/4. Let's get it right up under the center there. Yeah, that's about, I would say, wow, okay, so that's about a 1/2 inch under the rule. So if I can get it to about a 1/4 inch of the rule, that would help a lot more. Weight and weight placement is key. You know, you don't want a really heavy engine sitting way up too high, but at the same time, you don't want to be pushing the threshold of tolerance either. You don't want to be out there saying, oh, you know, they won't check that, or, you know, it should be fine. No, they will check that, and you won't be fine. If you have, you know, an engine like 2 inches too high, that could hurt you. That's just basic racing knowledge. Every little bit matters. And like I said, a 1/2 inch is not bad, but I really would like to get it down as close as humanly possible to the minimum. But we're going to have clearance issues because the engine cross member is really tight on this thing. So I think I can probably take that 1/4 inch out without hitting, but that's all we're going to get. But I don't care. We can't be too close to the rule because, again, we can make the car fast on a 1/4 inch, you know, here or there. It's going to be all right. So we'll get this thing set in place. Once I get the height right, then we can start working on them rear motor mounts and aligning the drive shaft down the drive shaft and transmission and stuff. And luckily, we can do that with the adjusters on the mounts. See, we can get it pretty close. These motor mounts have sliding adjustment cut into both of them. Plus, these mounts also have sliding adjustment cut into them. And if all else fails, I will make the transmission mount have sliding adjusters if the headers don't fit these mounts. So we'll figure it out, obviously. All right, we got her close now. It's still above by a little bit, but that's perfect. We'll leave that alone. So I'm gonna center it in the chassis. I gotta probably clear out everything behind the car and find a way to get a string or something down. It's gonna be tough to figure out, but I just know that I might measure it off. Maybe I'll measure it off the frame rails to center it in the middle of the car. Maybe I'll call Zach and say, hey, is the X member the very center of the car? Which, to be fair, likely is. When that's confirmed, we will tighten these bolts down just enough that it'll hold it in place. We'll try to figure out an angle for it and make sure that everything's got clearance, and then we will start building mounts and we'll figure out what mount is the best mount. Again, I'm still thinking about like header clearance, and having this back section here open really helps me, because if I'm trying to take an engine in and out and I've got those things bolted on, they're going to be a real pain. So I'd probably have to put in this, and then I'd have to reach in and put it in separately after putting the headers in. It would be a complete nightmare. I'm not really sure what I want to do at this point. I got a few design ideas, like I said, just kind of floating around in my head, but this is the worst part of building the car, is trying to figure everything out. And once you get everything figured out, everything goes pretty smoothly, but the process is tedious at best. So we'll stick with it, and we got to get this thing done. We got to get it ready. Once the engine is mocked in, we can leave it in there and start working on the shifter, and we can get that shifter linkage set up. And once we cut the hole for that and get some bolts put in and mocked up, we can have that done. And then we're gonna have to pull the motor out again anyway, just because we have to paint it. We have to put the clutch on it. We have to put all the rest of the plumbing. We have to do everything under the car. So this is a process, and you gotta just kind of stick with it. So it's the next day. I've been busy because I moved the motor, started cleaning up, and then spilled a whole bunch of oil 3 or 4 times. So it delayed me a lot. Yesterday, I was leaving the garage at this time. Right now, I'm just getting started. So, car's in the air. I've got the headers on it. That took my entire life to get the old collectors off of, well, the slip for the pipes off. So that took me all this time, and then I had to move the steering shaft over and I had to move the engine over because this header would not clear that steering shaft, unfortunately, just as I thought. I really kind of wish that I had pushed it down, and, well, you know what? To be honest with you, then it would interfere with the upper A-arm, or, yeah, up here, and I don't want to do that. So I got in here and I adjusted this a little bit. So I've been tinkering. I've been moving stuff. I've been playing around. And I've got a lot of room to work now. So now that I've got the headers in, what I want to do is I want to test these mounts that I've showed you already, which are these. And obviously they're universal. You can go one side or the other. That's where they go, and they clear the header. Now, if I want to swap the motor, that's going to be kind of an issue. But I don't think it'll be too big a problem. It's just that we'd have to, it would be an extra step. We'd have to, put temporary bolts in the bell housing, and then one side at a time, with a jack under it, we'd have to bolt the engine mount on, which is a real pain in the butt because, if the X member wasn't so wide where the transmission mount is, I'd probably just be building a cross member, because all I'd have to do is drill 2 holes, weld 2 of those bungs in, and put a big piece of steel across it with a tab and just be done. Here, I guess it's a lot easier to pull the motor out, but at the same time, is it? But also at the same time, maybe it'll help strengthen up the front clip. I don't know. All I know is I spent all day breaking my lawnmower, and now I'm in here. And I said, you know what, at least it's finally cooled off. So I threw the air on. I'm dying in here. So I'm gonna come up with a plan. Maybe I'll bolt these on, come up with some mounts, and start burning metal, because, well, this thing ain't gonna get done on its own. And I really gotta get this car done. So let's get to it. Well, there was a lot of thought that went into my decision, and my decision is this. We're going with a traditional transmission cross-member mount. I know that's not as race car as some people like it to be, but you know what? Considering convenience and other things that have to go into this type of a decision, it's like, you know, putting these ear tab mounts in would mean some kind of a stanchion that needs to come off of here. And if you don't make that, like at least 2 pieces, and then bolt this ear to those 2 pieces, it's a convoluted nightmare because you can't get the headers out. You'd have to pull the slips off and get the exhaust off, and then maybe pull the headers with the motor if it fits past the stanchion. They just don't work in these cars. You know, if you had a late model with, you know, over the top or 180 degree headers over the top, yeah, that's great because you're not fighting headers. But or like a modified where the headers come way out away from it and there's nothing there, that's fine. But for ease of use, the only thing I can think of is, well, I got a piece of 1/4 inch angle iron sitting over there that's really wide. I was like, oh, I should cut this up and make my stanchions with it. No, I'm just gonna cut them to length, find a way to weld it or bolt it in, and then weld a tab off the top that I can bolt the transmission mount to, because it's a solid transmission mount. I've used them forever. The only difference is now it's, you know, more like a stock vehicle than a race car. I can't really explain it more than that. Like I said, if I do that with the ears off the back, I'm creating more work for myself than what I had before. And what's the point in doing that? Oh, it seems to be more fancy than, you know, a regular street car. None of that matters. I've never had a problem with it in how long have we been racing for? 20, oh God, it's 25 years. Okay, so yeah, I've never had an issue. So this is a lot easier to use. It's out of the way of any exhaust. I can make it so that I literally don't even have to use nuts on it. I can bolt it in from the bottom without even having to use more than one tool. You know, it's faster, easier, it's more out of the way. We're just gonna do it this way. So obviously we still got to do a lot of finish work. Like I want to trim edges and I want to clean it up, and we got to paint it and stuff and cut the bolts loose, or not loose, but cut them off flush so that they don't poke out. But I'm still looking for like power tool batteries that I seem to have misplaced, just like everything else in the shop. Don't mind the background noise. I got the Race from Thunder Road on the old TV here. But this was it. This was the very simple piece that I'm going to polish. And we're going to paint. I made a little tab with a slot so that it would accommodate the mount. And it bolts in on both sides. We're going to use giant washers. It's just mocked in for now. But that should do it. And hopefully that should be enough for this thing to really kind of live happy. And it's really not much different than what I had in the other car, so fingers crossed. But anyway, that's it for me tonight. I got a late start and I'm finishing late. I gotta get to bed. I gotta go to work tomorrow. That's gonna be a process. So while I was also drilling those holes to mount the transmission mount that I've created, the drill, obviously it's in Milwaukee, so it's very powerful, and it caught and spun all the way around backwards, and my hand was still attached to it, and it made a very loud popping sound and straining noises and swearing. I think the swearing was out of my face though, but it was still making bad noises. So I think I'm gonna go ice that for a bit, and we got to come back out tomorrow and see what else we can finish up, because as it looks right now, engine's mounted, transmission's mounted. I think we're gonna have to move to the back next, because we got to start just keep making mounts. We got to keep making stuff. We got to put a battery in it. We got to get the rear end mounted. We got to fix the shock mounts and make sure that the spring mounts don't flex and all sorts of other fun stuff. So there's a ton to do. There's still painting. Whatever happens, we're going to start tomorrow just like every other day. It's the next day. Went to the ER. Went to walk-ins. And I got this thing. Luckily and unluckily, it's not broken. But it is badly sprained. And yeah, that hurts a lot. A whole lot. So it really puts a damper on what I can do, because I can't really, I can't grab a hell of a lot with my hand now. And that really kind of limits what I can do, because, I mean, how do I use a drill if I can't use my hand? How do I, you know, I can weld, because I can, it's like you can barely squeeze a trigger, but I mean, when you're talking, hand is all swollen to heck and sprained up. It's kind of tough to do something. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to attack my workbench and get me a workspace that I can actually use. I'm going to try to at least find some places for all the parts I took off the old car, because what I did was I just kind of chucked them everywhere, and now I'm tripping over them. Like, there's just parts just everywhere, and man, it is a nightmare right now trying to find things. Awful. Also, today was the day that this car was, hopefully, this was the day that I was supposed to be done with the car. Because today is the Cletus McFarland event at Stafford Motor Speedway for the Freedom 900, where they're having a 25-lap street stock race in front of a sold-out crowd before they have their Crown Vic race with YouTubers and celebrities, and I guess apparently a NASCAR star of some kind. Like, I think Greg Biffle is going to be there as a fill-in driver, but whatever. Yeah, this was supposed to be the race that this car was, well, I wanted it to be ready for, but we ain't there. We ain't there. Just complications and delays and on everything else on all fronts. Well, that's where we're at. So we'll just try to get it out there at some point. Maybe, you know what? Maybe it's probably a blessing in disguise, because I bet you this race is going to be a complete fest. Let's just put it that way. So, all right. If I do anything of any real note today, I'll let you know, but this was basically the only reason I even brought the camera out today. So we'll see if I can even get anything done today. If not, I'm going to try tomorrow. Oh, it would have been nice to race in front of a packed house like that. Oh well, I'm still here cleaning. Of course I'm disappointed that I'm not there and not participating in this event, especially as somebody who's a fledgling YouTuber at a show with all YouTubers who are successful. That would have been some great promotional stuff. Oh well, like I said, in life, you got to understand that there's going to be a lot of disappointment, and there's going to be a lot of losing. I harp on people all the time that in life, you're going to lose so much more than you're going to win. And if you win more than you lose, well, you're probably not a great person, because you know, you just haven't learned how to deal with failure. But if you can learn how to deal with disappointment and failure, well, I think you're just going to be a happier person overall. So they've already said they'll be back next year, and maybe we'll go race next year. You know, we'll see what happens, and like I said, if I had a whole lot of help with this thing, I bet you we could have been able to throw this thing together and have it done in time. But I prefer, you know, taking our time. You know, if we take our time and do it right, we'll be happier in the end, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be more successful too. So disappointment pushed to the side. My hand is starting to come around a little bit. Maybe it's the medication I took. Maybe it's actually starting to come around. Like I said, I sprained it, didn't break it, so it's all in how I heal, and seems to be going okay. But well, we're almost to a point where I can actually do work again. Got the floor pretty vacuumed. I don't try to sweep it when I have all these metal shards all over the place because you just can't get them out of the floor. You kneel down and pick something up, you get it in your knee. Happens all the time. So we did as much as we could. We're still working. I can't pick up lead weights with my hand because, well, it doesn't seem to work anymore right now. Pulled the seat out so that we could paint later, which we're getting close to that point, but obviously we're not there yet. I figured it was finger tight, pretty easy, rather lightweight, wouldn't hurt my hand. This is on the agenda for the battery box. I'm not going to leave it bolted together. I'm going to smooth it out, weld that into the chassis. There's a host of other things to do, obviously. We have so much left. And tonight was really just kind of a test. It was more just me seeing if my wrist would be okay enough to work. It's not really that great to work tonight, but I think with a little more rest and a little bit more ibuprofen or whatever, we could have it ready for tomorrow. I can't work at work tomorrow. The doctor told me not to. So I'll throw the wrist guard on and a glove over that so I can't ruin it. And we'll come back out tomorrow and get back at it because we have to get this car done. We're sneaking towards August. Season's winding down. I hate to say it already, but it's already winding down because up here in New England, you hit October, you're done. So we got a couple months left, but that doesn't give us a lot of opportunities when it's once a week and rain may be involved and we have a whole ton to do, and we got to get there. So let's go rest. We'll see you tomorrow. Next day, I got the whole day here, nice and early in the morning. I've got enough pain meds in me to kill an elephant, and I figured out I could put a glove over this, so that means we can get back to work. I'm gonna work on trying to make this thing right. We need to bolster the shock mounts. We need to get the rear spring buckets secured, honestly, because they're not really tied in very well. They think that a little, let's just see here, that weld there is enough to hold the spring buckets in, which is rather ridiculous. So I'm going to try to at least make something that will hold that up. If it's two gussets, like a triangular gusset to the frame from the back here to there, like that, or do I take and I put like, oh, I get the TV remote out of the way, a bar from here to here? I'm thinking the gussets might be a pretty good idea because it'll stop it from flexing both ways. Hopefully you can see it. I'm doing the front facing camera, I have no idea. And then we're gonna do our little bolstering of the shock mount, which now you can see. These shock mounts, I told you before, I mean, they're like 1/8 inch steel, but I got these, or are they quarter? I can't even remember. They might be, oh, they're quarter, but anyway, they got no lip around it. They're just a flat piece of steel, like I showed you. So I wanted to tie it in here a little bit, but also on a stock one, if you recall, they're all stamped steel, you know what I mean? They're just production line stuff. There's a little lip at the bottom to help it from torsional loading and flexing and stuff. I figure what I'll do is I'll take this, we will tie it in to the spring perch and just roll it around the edge all the way around, and then tie it in here, as well as weld it in all the way around the edge, because I still need clearance for the shock, but at the same time I can't have it flexing. So if I add a little lip around the edge and tie it in two places and then gusset this to keep it from flexing from on spring pressure, I think that'll help a lot. Underneath the car, the entire driver's floor is plate, right? So underneath the car, it's tied in around the edges and it's all zipped into the cross members and stuff, but there's X member that comes through the car. It's not tied into those X members, and I'm thinking With the floor mounted pedals, I'm probably gonna weld it up there just so it's a little stronger, but it's also probably gonna rattle like hell. And with the tins all, you know, pop riveted in for ease of use and access, which I'm not used to, but it's actually pretty convenient. We need to make sure that that floor is a little less rattly, so I think I'll be zipping it in a little bit on different places. And I hope that doesn't hurt the overall structure of the car and how it flexes. I'm not sure how it's supposed to be, but it's also going to be a little safer at the same time. That's a lot better, because yeah, I know I added a little bit of weight, but the only thing holding this on was that little seam in between the two gussets. It was literally that seam there. Oh, don't mind my hand, I'm on break. I got my string cheese and my ice, and I'm literally just like trying to cool off. But anyway, trying to get some swelling out of it. It is bad. So I got these edges put on. They're gonna help a lot with reducing flex. I'm gonna take the grinder and just kind of flatten these out a little bit. I was working with the welder to try to get some edges and some weld practice done, but they're a little taller than I want, so I'm gonna flatten them out just for looks and cleanliness. And other side's exactly the same. Hopefully, like I said, that should be able to strengthen the spring bucket up without too much effort, and hopefully resist flexing load on the shocks. So now, after my hand swells down a little bit, we're gonna get under it, finish welding the bottom. And I'm feeling kind of froggy today because it's only noon and I got the whole day to do this. I'm gonna put the battery tray in that's kind of in this pile of crap, and hopefully that can go in there somewhere, but I probably should have gotten help with the cheese, but there's nobody home to help me, and my grip strength is kind of not good enough to open these, so I think I'll be losing some teeth, but we'll do that. So we finished welding underneath all of these bars in the fuel cell mounts. We got this all cleaned up and nice. This looks actually almost professional. I'm sure we're gonna have to gusset somewhere else because it's still gonna wanna do this total, but it's gonna be blocked in by this, so who knows? We'll see. That's gusseted so that when I grab this, it won't shake back and forth anymore. That's a good thing. I got a battery box in. I got one of them cheap ones from Amazon and altered it to make it work for me. By altering it, I mean by not using any of the bolt-in stuff and welding it together and then welding it to the chassis. We got under the car and we zipped a couple of tacks underneath there, and to which I was burned on my knee pretty bad. And I have to go inside and clean that off so that doesn't get infected. With building race cars like this, a lot of the issues that you're gonna find are essentially, what do you do next? You know, you start overthinking stuff and you start planning and you think that, you know, you got to go in some specific order. And in some small way you kind of do, but in some other ways you kind of don't. Because, well, you don't want to paint it if you've still got fabrication to do, because you'll be grinding paint off and redoing it, right? But at the same time, you don't want to be painting over wires and stuff either. So it's like, I'm looking at this car and I'm thinking to myself, we're getting awful close to painting this chassis, because the rear fabrication is essentially done. I did the spring pocket reinforcement, I did the shock mount reinforcement, I got the fuel cell in. The only fabrication that I really have left on the rear here, I also got the battery box in, like I said. The only real fabrication in the back is putting the tins in, which we have to have the body on to do, and the rear bumper. Oh, and a few body mounts, but like other than that, man, we're really not that far off here. I mean, I'm gonna start moving up front. Guys, my wrist is starting to bug the hell out of me again, so I think I'm gonna go ice it and call it for a day and call it for this video. But we got a lot done. I mean, a lot of important stuff done. Like I said, the whole back half is pretty much done except for tins and a drive shaft hoop and a bumper. That's really about it. We got to move into the interior. We got to do wiring, and we got to do a shifter, and we got to do gauges. But other than that, that's all we have to do up there. Up front is kind of where we have to do the most work. Up front, we got to get the front end on. We got to build a front end for the frame saver area here. You know, the radiator supports and the body supports and stuff. We'll put the body supports on when we're putting the body on, obviously, but we got to get that front end fabricated. Won't take a lot of time. I got the right hole saws for like 1.5 inch tubing, which I think this little guy is down here. And I might have some just for the front end, just to make it a little bit weaker in case you get into a hard crash, it won't screw the frame up. So we're gonna build that. We're gonna build radiator supports. We're gonna start painting and putting stuff together. I mean, we're really starting to move along. It really won't be too long when we're putting a body on this thing, but I really just wanted to say that I appreciate everybody who's come along for the ride and who's joined me recently, and for all the people who've been there the whole time, thank you all again. I appreciate every single one of you. I appreciate all the stuff you do for me by sharing it, by subscribing, by telling your friends and doing all that stuff. It means so much to me, and I'm not asking for much more than that. You know, I ain't asking for no money. I ain't asking you for anything other than just your attention, and maybe we could go racing together someday, and maybe a couple other projects along the way. But tell your friends if you think somebody would maybe enjoy this type of thing, you know, amateur mechanicery and engineering and fabricating, and like I said, amateur. But again, until the next time when we get back to work on this thing, thank you again. I appreciate it.